Welcome to today's Explainer. So imagine having an idea so completely wild, so out there that literally everyone laughs at you. Today, we're going to deconstruct exactly how the founders of Airbnb used some seriously radical creative problem solving to build a multi-billion-dollar empire from absolute zero. We'll be tracing their steps from sleeping on actual air mattresses to completely reshaping global travel. And honestly, the most important part, we're going to uncover the specific framework they used to solve challenges that seemed basically impossible at the time. Okay, let's just dive right into this.
So what do you do when you can't pay your rent? I mean, it's a terrifying scenario, right? Back in 2007, two broke designers out in San Francisco, Brian Chesky and Joe Gibbia, were facing this exact extreme constraint. They had zero investors, they didn't have a successful company, and there was absolutely no rich family backing them up. It was just them, a tiny apartment, and a massive looming rent bill they just couldn't afford. But, this is exactly where the creative problem solving kicks in. Right around that time, this huge design conference rolled into the city. And guess what? Every single hotel was completely sold out. You had thousands of visitors totally stranded with nowhere to stay.
Now, instead of just throwing in the towel, they leaned into their first major problem-solving technique, using absolutely whatever resources were immediately available to create a testable asset. They literally just bought a few air mattresses, they blew them up, squeezed them into their cramped apartment, and threw up a website offering strangers a cheap place to crash. They even threw in Pop-Tarts for breakfast and called the whole shebang Air Bed and Breakfast. Now, I know, most people would think this sounds completely ridiculous. Like, why on earth would anyone pay to sleep on the floor of some random guy's apartment? But a few people actually booked it. And that tiny little spark of traction, it kind of changed everything.
Which brings us right to problem number one: survival and the massive trust barrier. You see, the really harsh reality of building something completely brand new is that the world rarely believes in you at first, especially back in the early days of the modern internet. People simply did not trust strangers online. The idea of going and sleeping inside someone else's house didn't just feel weird, it felt downright unsafe. And because of this massive trust barrier, their trajectory took a pretty dark turn. They launched in 2007, got completely mocked by investors through early 2008, and by late 2008, they were totally out of money. We're talking the absolute trough of sorrow here. This is the exact moment where 99% of startups just die. The bank account hit zero and people quit. But these guys, they viewed this massive obstacle as a creative trigger. They started looking for an entirely unexpected pivot just to survive.
And instead of giving up, they leaned hard into lateral thinking. It was the 2008 US presidential election at the time, so instead of sitting around writing more failed business plans, they designed and sold limited edition political cereal boxes. They called them Obama O's and Captain McCain's. Yes, you are hearing that right, cereal boxes. They basically transitioned from a tech startup to a makeshift cereal company overnight, just desperately trying to scrape together enough cash to keep their website servers running.
And incredibly, no way. It actually worked. This bizarre little side hustle generated thousands of dollars. People actually bought these novelty boxes like crazy. And emphasizing this tangible success is absolutely crucial, because selling cereal literally kept this future tech giant alive. It proves this fundamental lesson in creative problem solving. Sometimes, the solution to your biggest, most existential problem has absolutely nothing to do with your core business. You literally just do whatever it takes to survive.
Okay, so moving on to problem number two, the growth barrier.
Because survival is really just step one, right? Soon enough, they faced their next big evolution. Even after they managed to get into this super famous startup accelerator called Y Combinator, their growth was just totally stagnant. And the reason? Users were uploading these incredibly dark, blurry, just terrible photos of their apartments that made the places look completely uninviting. But then, they received this game-changing piece of advice from their mentors. 3 simple words: go meet your users. Now that sounds simple, sure, but in the tech world, founders love to hide behind their computer screens, writing code and looking at spreadsheets. This advice physically forced them to step out of the office, leave their comfort zone, and investigate the problem in person, exactly where the users were experiencing it.
So to fix this huge trust barrier caused by bad lighting, they didn't write some fancy new algorithm. Instead, they rented a camera, literally flew to New York, went door to door, and personally took professional photos for their hosts. It was incredibly manual, like a total grind, and it took a ton of time. But the result? Bookings instantly exploded. Why? Because people trust what they can clearly see. They solved a highly digital problem with a deeply human manual solution. It really proves a core problem-solving rule that startups use all the time. Sometimes you have to do incredibly unscalable things to find a scalable truth.
Which leads us to problem number 3, scaling without capital.
Think about it. How do you grow a travel company globally without the billions and billions of dollars you'd normally need to build physical hotels in every major city? To understand their solution here, we really have to look at the psychology of travel. Traditional hotels offer a product that is very corporate, it's predictable, and frankly, it can be a bit cold. You get a standard room, you get a standard bed. But the Airbnb model completely flipped this on its head. They made travel deeply personal, emotional, and completely unique. Suddenly, you weren't just booking a room somewhere, you were booking a treehouse or a beach villa, a tiny Tokyo apartment, maybe even a European castle. They realized they weren't just competing on price anymore, they were competing on human experience.
So their ultimate business innovation was this massive paradigm shift, selling access. They completely hacked global scaling. By building a digital platform that just connects people globally, they entirely bypassed the massive construction costs of owning real estate inventory. Honestly, it's brilliant. Airbnb owned almost nothing. No hotels, no buildings. They didn't sell rooms. They sold access to rooms that already existed. This profound shift in how they thought about their product is exactly what allowed them to scale across the globe at absolute lightning speed.
Now, let's take a look at the ripple effect of all this disruption. As smartphones became a totally normal part of everyday life, millions of hosts started flooding onto the platform. This once ridiculed cereal-selling startup had actually revolutionized global travel. Obviously, traditional hotel empires started getting very nervous, and it sparked intense, complex debates in city halls all over the world. But look, massive scale always brings systemic consequences, right? We have to impartially recognize the real cost of this disruption. As the company exploded, critics rightly pointed out that short-term rentals were driving up local housing prices and even pushing out long-term residents. Certain neighborhoods just became completely overloaded with tourists. On top of that, the platform has had to constantly battle issues around fake listings, safety concerns, and some pretty wild disruptions from massive party houses. It's a really stark reminder that every single disruptive solution inevitably creates an entirely new set of complex realities to deal with.
All right, let's wrap this up with the ultimate problem-solving framework.
The entire story of this company is just an absolute masterclass in perspective. And you can really summarize it with a super simple equation: desperation plus creativity. Most people, when they look at severe constraints, having no money, no trust, absolutely no resources, they just see insurmountable obstacles. But these founders viewed those exact same obstacles fundamentally differently. They saw them as forcing functions, things that demanded relentless imagination. This massive billion-dollar company started with intense desperation just to pay rent, and an imagination that fully embraced completely ridiculous ideas, whether that was selling political cereal or literally going door-to-door photographing apartments. They proved that sometimes having absolutely no resources is the best resource you can possibly have, if you combine it with lateral thinking.
Through all their struggles, all the rejections, instead of asking, hey, what massive business should we build today, they anchored their entire success on this one profound question. What do people actually need right now? Well, they needed a cheap place to sleep. They needed a way to trust strangers. They needed a more authentic human way to travel. So I want to leave you with this thought. When you look at the absolute biggest obstacles in your own life or in your own work, how might you apply this exact same perspective? What totally ridiculous, unscalable idea might actually just be your biggest breakthrough? Thanks so much for hanging out for this explainer. Keep asking the right questions and keep exploring the status quo.